As Zoltan said, my name is Negin, and I'm a lawyer at Segev LLP. We're a full-service law firm with a specialty in gaming and betting law. Our head office is in Vancouver, Canada, but we also have satellite offices in a few places around the world. I am very pleased to introduce my guest today, Akhil Mittal, who is VP of Product Management at Paramount Commerce. Paramount Commerce provides online gaming and remittance merchants payment solutions, and their mission is to simplify payments for merchants and users. Akhil, thank you so much for being here.
Hi Negin. Hi, everyone. My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So today's topic is what it takes for a seamless user experience and how that is key for trends such as live micro betting and compatibility with accessibility tools. I know in the last segment, Troy and Alexis touched on these things, but Akhil, I'd like your take. What do you think of when you hear seamless user experience?
Yeah, I think if I go back a little bit in the early 90s, when the first time the term user experience was introduced in the early 90s by Don Norman, the Apple days, and then design methodology or design thinking methodology came into play around the same time. So all of that sort of propelled user interaction forward with empathizing with the user and keeping that human-centered. So I think when we think of any seamless user experience, that means, in simple terms, there are different definitions of this as well, but user interaction that is effortless and frictionless as possible. So it could be to do with your user interface, the entire user journey from start to finish, from sign up to completing a bet, the content that is shared and how it is presented to the user, and also how it integrates seamlessly to meet the need of the user at the end and the expectations that the user has, with no interruptions in their workflow or any distractions to their attention. So I think that I would say what a seamless user means. And the second piece, which not a lot of people think about, is it also is to support the business's goals when you are putting a user experience forward. So like from a payments perspective, when we design solutions, that means we look at how will that integrate seamlessly with our gaming operators, their cashiers, their checkouts, and also ensuring that the payment process is as intuitive as possible, as convenient, and as fast. And same thing from an operator's perspective could be that how is the layout of all of the different gaming options that are there, sports betting options, how accessible is responsible gaming tools, or the methods of deposit and withdrawal. So entirely, like, if this processes should be as frictionless as possible, that I would say is what I would term as a seamless user experience.
That is so informative. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that it's everything around the user experience that sort of shapes how the main product is received. But I think a lot of people at first would think that the main product should be the main focus. Why is it important to focus resources on user interface rather than main product? Because it sounds like maybe folks wouldn't notice the interface if it is that seamless at first, if they're not used to something like that.
Right. And I think the answer would not be one or the other. It will be both in this case, because a product is no longer just a product. It's cohesive, integrated set of experiences that makes a product. So you can't really differentiate from the product. The one thing is product and services in today's world, with the speed of innovation, at some point become commodity. So they're just like the other one. So ease of use and user experience becomes the differentiation. We were at one of the operators' yearly review that was happening, and they shared that what matters in their research to the users was trustworthiness, ease of use, and being fun and exciting. So, being ease of use was right up there. So it is important for the product to be good. That's sort of table stakes in a way. But I think the user experience really adds more value to that. So now, from our perspective, when we look at user experience from payments perspective, when we launched our Interact product a few years ago, one of the biggest things was the user interface. We focused we took the design first approach, and by far since then, our adoption rates are higher than most of the competitors in this space. Again, it speaks to design, the user interface, and the other thing is when you are offering a better user interface and experience, your costs could dramatically go down because now the user doesn't have to do customer support. They can find information easily. You can also look at the brand perception from a user perspective. And then when you are looking at design and user interface and looking at creative ways, it could be that you might find some unmet needs and look, it could turn into more innovative play as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thinking about that kind of user experience and the ease that you're describing, it kind of reminds me of legislation. So as a lawyer, I often think about the ways that governments regulate gaming. And one of the ways I find, or how I would see it, is that they try to add friction, which can be frustrating for operators, of course. So they do things like timeout, or requiring that folks get like a check of some sort to make sure that they're slowing down if they're in a groove. And so friction can be frustrating for some people. But like, what is friction? I know you touched on this in the last thing that you described, but like, is friction just something that players don't like, or that is frustrating? Or is there something maybe folks don't realize about friction? Can you give an example of something that used to be tolerated?
Right. And I think that's an interesting point, because it's not just what the users like or dislike. I think the unnecessary hurdles and obstacle we put in the user's way when they're performing an action, I think that's what I would call as friction. That slows them down and disrupts them. Again, you rightly said, sometimes there are some things you need for the user to complete, and those are necessary pieces of the puzzle. So a complicated user interface is definitely a friction. You don't, in today's world, you should be looking at, modern interfaces are, more easy to access. There should be no confusing navigation. Slow load times. This is something we used to expect earlier. Now, fast loads time are essential. In some cases, it could be number of steps to achieve a goal, like unnecessary steps in the middle. Lack of clarity of guidance, again, going back to that cost of support, and you don't know where to go when you're sort of looking for help. But a product may have a feature, or we might add a feature intentionally designed to challenge or educate a user, because we could be seen, perceived as frustrating, but it's could be a more rewarding experience once the user goes through it. And for example, this is a very good example is, once a user is signed up for a sports betting operator, the first to go, so they want to go bet, they want to play. So, but they have to pay to play, like how I want to call it. Payment is the first friction point the users will face there, because now they have to pay before they pay. So there's a seamless journey that you want to expect from the user. But what happens is, when the user is not used to a payment method that they've paid with before, because new payment methods keep coming into the market. So the first time, sometimes we add some education for the user, but the repeat user experience could become much faster, much better. So in that case, again, we add this only as an educational tool. We would try to make it as intuitive as possible.
Yeah. And I think that even though folks know that payment is obviously a part of the experience and that has to happen, I agree that there are different ways to do it, and that some ways are more painful than others. Some take the experience further and others don't. I'm going to speak about accessibility tools in a moment, but I think that's a great segue to speak about micro betting and live betting, if I can jump to that topic. Because even for folks who can easily navigate those kinds of, payment processes that you've just described, when it comes to time being short, suddenly I feel like optimization becomes really essential, and that frustration can multiply because, as the game is going and you want to micro bet throughout that time, you're literally losing the experience as it unfolds if you lose that time. So what does that process look like for platforms where the process isn't streamlined? Like, can you take me through sort of some of those challenges and versus when it is? Like, I guess the differences must be stark.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the from a perspective of micro betting, again, this is kind of a type of in-game betting, which is you're looking at moments in sports, which is so time sensitive, which is I think a great innovative tool for creating sort of instant gratification and continuous betting opportunities. But I think because of its time sensitivity, players want quick deposits, a quick fund deposit. So I've seen examples of some bad, some okay, some good ones. For example, for a bad one, what happens is when a user wants to deposit or they don't have enough funds, but they want to bet on an in-game play. At that point, they were sent back to the cashier or the checkout page again to go through the whole process. Now they kind of leave the experience, so which is not ideal in any way. A second approach, but taken by another operator, was more so showing that same experience there, so a little bit better, but the user has to still go through selecting and doing. So nothing was sort of done for the user. The user had to think through and check and do things again. I think the better one is more a fully in-game experience, which is like a feature like we offer in our instant bank transfer product, which allows for a single click experience for user to deposit. Now, you want to bet, you want to top up, or you have enough money, you click a button, but deposit. There is a favorite method stored in, and you can just basically pay through that method. You've used that before successfully. So I think that is a great way to have a full experience for the user, which is in-game, time sensitive, and it's made for gaming basically in the way it works. I know you had asked, and I apologize, I forgot to give an example of a friction point earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I think just quickly, if you don't mind, I think the Uber versus the regular taxi is a great experience of what friction we used to face before Uber changed the experience completely. Then they enhanced the experience and so on. So I think that's a good example because it puts things in perspective of what to expect when it's a good experience for the user.
Definitely, operators don't want to be the taxi; they want to be the Uber in that example. Yeah. And I feel like what you mentioned just makes so much sense, and I find it incredible that you can go one click because there's no number, I guess, that's lower than one. I guess if you had 0 clicks, it'd be telepathy. If someone is going through that streamlined process, then it sounds like it's more than just being faster. It's being immersive, like you said. Instead of taking them out of the game, it's keeping them there and having them experience it, rather than having something going on and you're like feeling like you're missing it. That sounds like the direction that operators need to go through.
That's right.
But there are folks, I think, that even if they're sort of able to have that immersion, and normally there are demographics that are aware of friction in other ways, that they need accessibility tools or they're unfamiliar with online platforms. And so these demographics, they're not sweet spot demographics. They could be overlooked by some. And the reason that they're not sweet spot is because they can't access otherwise fun experiences, otherwise even intuitive experience. And that's because their accessibility tools might not work on all platforms, but that sounds like a problem that can be solved. So what can operators do? How can they help the tools work? Is this something that's worth exploring?
Yeah, I think I would say it's like a team effort between two parties. One is, of course, this has to be mandated, which it is in some jurisdictions. For example, in the Ontario market, there are two things that are happening. One is the AODA, Accessibility for Ontarians Act. So that sort of lays down the guidelines and so that the operators have to be, or any business has to be compliant with. And then the gaming regulator, AGCO, makes sure that the operators comply with it. But that's just the one piece, right? We always know that compliance is one thing they have to always chase and make sure that people do it. But the operators have a big role in this. If you look at a couple of them, DraftKings and FanDuel, if you look at their websites, they definitely have made some big strides in terms of adding some accessibility tools and trying to meet or exceed the guidelines. But I think there could be more that could be done. So I was actually reading an article about an individual who is C4-5 quadriplegic. He used to be a tennis player in freshman year. And now he works for a company called Accessibility, which basically allows for AI tools, which operators, and they actually offer them to operators so they can actually be more compliant easily and make it more accessible, their platform. So I think that would be, ideal because they're looking for opportunities to innovate in that area.
That's yet another way that AI seems to be helping us in every kind of
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that was so informative. Thank you. Zoltan, do we have any questions from the audience at all? We have about 10 minutes left.
No. There's no questions right now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Akhil. That was so informative. I really feel like I love learning, and I learned so much from you today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate
definitely.
it. Nice meeting you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.